Today is December 17th, 2024. This is episode 86 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I am joined by Mike Koomar. In this episode today, we're just going to spend the entire time talking about what was a pretty epic Saturday in the non-conference. So, Mike, this is pretty much just going to be a recap of, some of the many games that we saw on Saturday. Clearly can't get to all of them here, but let's start off in South Carolina. Memphis went on the road to play the Clemson Tigers at the Little John Coliseum, 11 a.m. tip. If you missed the start of this one, you weren't the only one. Seemed like the fans rolled in a little late, too.
Late. Yeah.
It was an extremely sleepy start for Memphis. Clemson did pull it back close at halftime, and then Memphis sort of led the entire second half. Clemson gets it to overtime, but it is the Memphis Tigers who get the victory here, Mike. First, let's just talk about what kind of happened in this game before we kind of go into where both teams are going forward.
Yeah, I mean, this was really, it kind of seemed like a back-and-forth game. Memphis definitely had their streaks in this one. Started the game off hot. Like you said, it felt like Clemson was really sleepy early on in this one. Memphis got off to a quick 10-0 run in the first 5 minutes. It took almost until the 6 minutes had gone by in this game for Clemson to even score. However, they were able to make this really competitive and even took the lead coming down the stretch. They had a 4-point lead with about 2 minutes to go in this one. So Clemson definitely had their chances to win this game. Memphis fought their way to get this game into overtime. And then in overtime, once again, it was back and forth really until the last 30 seconds of this one when Memphis pulled away. They get a huge 5-point win. Memphis really needed this game too, Sean. So really props to them for buckling down and getting a key road win. Tyrese Hunter really seems to be coming out finally for Memphis. The Texas transfer had 23 points in this game. He's averaging 16 on the season right now. So after a pretty sleepy start to the season, he's playing really well, along with Colby Rogers, who had 22 in this one, the senior from Covington, Georgia. So Memphis, they're starting to look a lot better. And after a really bad start to the week against Arkansas State.
Yeah. Like, Mike, the question I was going to ask you is, where do you think this Memphis team is at? Just a month ago or so, they came in second in Maui with victories over UConn and Michigan State, which look a lot better than we thought they did. Now, they did lose to Auburn in the championship, and Auburn, might be the best team in the country. But, the way that their schedule is set up, we've talked about many times. They're loading their non-conference with stacked games because they play in the American Conference. They beat Missouri, a road win against UNLV, a road win against San Francisco. All three of those teams are at least all right. And then you drop that home game against Arkansas State. Now, Arkansas State is a pretty good team for mid-major. They are in the high 100s. But considering all the other teams that Memphis has beat, Mike, I don't know if it completely erases it, but it is shaping up already to be a pretty puzzling resume. And we're only in the middle of December. Now, of course, they could take this out of the committee's hands and win the American Conference, which they probably should. But, Mike, in terms of an at-large resume here, it's a big question mark for Memphis.
Yeah, I mean, they're currently ranked 21st in the country, but they gave up 85 points to an Arkansas State team, and this game was never even close, Sean. I don't think Memphis got this within 5 points in the second half. Like, Arkansas State kept their distance from him in the entire game. Tyrese Hunter really struggled in this game. He only had 4 points, but giving up 85 to Arkansas State is inexcusable at home. You understand this is kind of a funky time of year with final exams, but I got to be honest, I don't really know how much they really care about academics at Memphis. So you don't expect that to really slow down their players like that. So that was very concerning. We're seeing similar patterns to last year where Arkansas played really well in the out-of-conference. They won the games that you thought they maybe weren't going to win, but then they lost a couple of games in the out-of-conference that they probably shouldn't have, and then totally flopped once they got to the conference season. So I'm a little bit wary. Maybe we're seeing the similar picture that we saw last year.
So, Mike, their non-conference isn't done yet. They play three: Virginia on the road, and then Mississippi State and Ole Miss at home. Virginia is probably not a tournament team at this point, but that's a road game. And then Mississippi State and Ole Miss are. So you have 3 more chances to pick up NCAA tournament quality victories. If they are to get 2 of those 3, I still think they're in a good spot. Arkansas State is just outside the top 100. That's not going to murder you. There's no chance that really gets to a quad 4. There's a chance that it doesn't even get to quad 3. All right, there's a chance that it doesn't do that, but I still think they're set up well. They came into this Clemson game needing a victory. They threw the first punch, and Clemson was really never able to control the game again. Clemson did beat Miami in between this one and their super awesome victory against Kentucky, but it came down to one team kind of wanted it more than the other, and that's not how we've really talked about Penny Hardaway's Memphis teams. They've come into these games in the past needing a victory and sort of laid an egg. They didn't do that here, and they've got 3 tough games to end up the conference season. Clemson is in another close game right now as we're recording, Mike, and we're going to wait until that game goes final and probably talk about it on another episode, depending on what happens. All right, move back to the middle of the country. Indianapolis for the Indy Classic. Texas A&M goes on the road to the Gainbridge Fieldhouse to play Purdue. Not exactly Mackey Arena, but not exactly a true neutral game either, but it's the Aggies, Mike, who get the 70-66 victory. Again, sort of like the last game we talked about, Texas A&M was sort of in front the entire way. Purdue had a couple runs to get it close, but it's the Aggies who pick up a really impressive neutral court victory here. So a big win for the SEC and a conference, Mike, that looks like it's going to be an absolute gauntlet.
Yeah, I mean, first off, the SEC had a hell of a Saturday. I took a look. They played, I'm pretty sure, 5 ranked opponents, and in total they were 12-1. Their only loss on Saturday was SMU taking down LSU, which LSU very bottom of the conference anyway. So this is looking like a hell of a conference, looking like by far the best conference in college basketball. But getting to this game, I think what was really outstanding is you looked at A&M's defense in this game was fantastic. Yeah, Purdue shot 45% from the field. Purdue didn't score a basket for about 6.5 minutes in the second half, from about the 11:40 or 11:15 mark till about the 6:40 mark. They did not score a bucket. They forced 16 Purdue Boilermaker turnovers and just forcing Purdue to make really bad passes and not getting quality shots. Look, we get it. They were still shot 45% from the field. But 16 turnovers is insane. So A&M getting an incredibly impressive win. And after, they kind of had a head-scratching start, that loss to UCF in the first game of the season was shocking for a lot of people because we expected high hopes for A&M. I think those high hopes are back and then some after a statement win. They call it a neutral court, but this was really a home court game for Purdue.
Mike, you talked about that UCF game. Texas A&M went to Vegas, got out of there 2-1. They come back, they beat Wake Forest, they beat Texas Tech on the neutral, and then they beat Purdue here. This Buzz Williams team the play style is very similar to Buzz Williams teams of past. They play a lot of defense, they miss a lot of shots, and if it's really ugly, but they get the job done. I think the ceiling might be a little bit higher for this version. Purdue's not going to do that turnover-wise very often, especially outside of a true road game. Yeah. And I think they're really athletic. They might just bludgeon teams to death with defense and offensive rebounds. Texas A&M rebounded Purdue 34-23 here. That's something that we're going to see a lot more of for Buzz Williams' team. And Mike, SEC power rankings might be a little messy right now because, every team but one, I think, maybe 2, thinks that they can make the NCAA tournament. So,
yeah,
that would be a mess. But you have to think Texas A&M might be a little bit better than we've seen from the team that just snuck in off the bubble to the 9 seed in the past. I think they might be a little better than that.
Yeah, I think one thing that really stands out for A&M is not only is it experience, but it's experiences played with each other. 4 of these 5 players have played on this A&M team for 3 years. Most of these guys starting are 4-year seniors or 5-year seniors. So you've got experience, but they've played with each other a bunch. They played a lot of ball together, and it's really showing. It really showed in this game against Purdue. So I think that's what makes A&M so special, and it makes them so dangerous as they finish up a pretty easy portion of their out of conference and then get back into SEC play.
And Mike, with Texas A&M in the past, especially since they've had Wade Taylor, it's sort of been, well, if he makes a ton of tough shots, then we're going to have a chance to win. That's not really the case this year.
No.
They're still able to win without him. I mean, he's just not an efficient player. He's not. He'll have games where he goes off for 30, but 6 for 15 in this one, not a problem. No, a lot of things went wrong from Purdue's point of view here, but it's Texas A&M that picks up a really big non-conference victory for really for the SEC over the Big Ten as a whole. We've seen a lot of those. Another SEC over a Big Ten game, Mike. Auburn 91, Ohio State 53. If you heard Joe Mead and I preview this on another video, we expected a, lopsided affair here, but Mike, this one was over by one of the first 2 media timeouts. They're up 49-21 at halftime, and they cruised to a huge victory. Was this more impressive from Auburn or more warning signs for Ohio State?
I think we all knew the kind of team that Auburn was going into this game. Look, I think they're the number 1 team in the country. They're ranked second, and that's just because Tennessee's unbeaten. But they're a hell of a team. And you look at Ohio State, I think this was certainly concerning, probably the toughest game that they had seen all year. But you saw they had a 24-point loss to Maryland earlier on in the year. They lost to a not very good Texas team. They got, they lost to Pitt. This is not a very impressive Ohio State team. So I didn't expect this kind of outcome. I didn't expect a 40-point loss. But I certainly didn't expect this game to be really all that close. So Auburn continues to do great things. They look dominant, and they're going to be part of this SEC juggernaut. And they've got potentially the player of the year on their team right now. So in Johnny Broome. So they look explosive. Johnny Broome in this game, 21 points, 20 rebounds. And he's 6 assists to go with it. He's just such a balanced player. I don't know if anybody in the country can go up against him.
And they get a chance to knock off another big non-conference win, Mike, when they play Purdue on Saturday in Birmingham. So again, another one of those pretend neutral games that surely they'll have. This game was in Atlanta against Ohio State, and it was essentially an Auburn home game there. You'd expect the Tiger fans to get up to Birmingham next Saturday. But, Mike, they are number 2 in the rankings, as you said, but every analytical site has them number 1 by a significant margin. On KenPom, they are about 4.2 points per 100 possessions better than Tennessee. And just for an example, that is the same range from 2nd to 9th. So the analytics love Auburn. This essentially, I think we thought that Auburn was clearly going to outclass Ohio State here. The spread was still 12.5. Like, this was a huge cover margin, numbers boosting win for Bruce Pearl and his Auburn Tigers. All right, Mike, we've got a ton of other good ones here. We can't really get to them all. We did talk about a number of the Big Ten games in the In a Nutshell podcast, so if you want to hear about those, you can go over there. But, Mike, one game that sort of was a little bit closer than maybe a couple people thought was Louisville going on the road to Kentucky. The Cardinals have been extremely unlucky with 2 starters going down for the season already, and sort of the luck that the good fortune that they had early on the season is not continuing. But they put up a fight here. Kentucky is a top 5 team in the country and really couldn't shake them for the entire way. Kentucky gets the victory and gets to 10-1, but Louisville probably hangs around a little longer than people thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were points when Kentucky would get up to a 10-point lead, but kudos to Louisville for really sticking around in this game. They never really quit. They were able to weather a few storms here, and who knows what kind of season Louisville is going to have at this point, Sean. I don't think it's going to be all that special. They play in an easy conference, which will help them, but kudos to them for sticking around. I think for Kentucky, it does raise questions. They gave up 85 points to a Louisville team that's lost two of their best scorers. So um, I I think that is a big red flag for them going forward. They've got, I believe, a pretty easy schedule until they start SEC play. They've got Ohio State, which I don't think is a particularly good game, and then they've got Brown. So um, that is a red flag of mine for Kentucky, I think, going into these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and Mike, for if you want to look at the box score, obviously, if you watched the game, Kentucky hit a bunch of shots 58% from the field,
Yeah.
53% from three. Lamont Butler is 10 for 10 from the field. He did miss 5 free throws, but still, they made all those shots and still really couldn't shake Louisville. That's a little bit alarming for me. This Kentucky team was supposed to be a little better at defense than this. They end up getting the job by 8. Spread was at 9.5, so it's essentially a push. Pretty much essentially what the computers thought would happen did. And in terms of Louisville, Mike, I mean, the ACC is not that good. I think Louisville still should probably be over 500 in the league. And if you can get I don't know if they'll be able to knock down one of the big dogs in their conference. And I don't think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. But with how bad the ACC is, you still have to think Louisville will come in the top half.
They absolutely will, and I think with the ACC, Sean, you really never know what's going to happen in the conference tournament, right? All it takes is one upset. If Duke gets upset in the ACC tournament, it turns into the Wild West in the Atlantic Coast Conference, where
Just
you
like last year.
Exactly, where you have an NC State coming out of nowhere and taking care of business. It could happen in this conference, so I stay tuned to see what madness comes from the ACC tournament. Who knows? Duke might run away with it, but if they lose, who knows?
I think as of now, Mike, there's probably 3 tournament teams in the ACC, or obviously more could make it, but if the season ended today, Duke, Clemson, and Pitt are probably in. SMU is probably on the outside. UNC is certainly on the outside. And then, a bunch of these other teams, Mike, have 3, 4, and 5 losses. Like, it might not take a whole lot to get top 5 in the ACC. Then your first games against a 12 seed, and then 4. Like, I could see Louisville doing that now, unless they expand their depth here. That's a long way away. But Louisville fans are panicking big time. But you're not playing in the SEC. Like, this can still be an all right first season, which would be a complete step up from where we've been the last couple of years with Louisville.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you looked at Louisville as probably the worst power conference team the last couple of seasons. So this is vast improvement, and they just got to keep building on what they've got there. You brought up North Carolina there, Sean. North Carolina, we'll get to probably in a later episode. They really fell apart and blowing a game against Florida. So going to drop another game down to 6-5. Who knows what North Carolina has to do to get into the tournament? I think they're going to have to beat UCLA on Saturday, though, to give themselves at least one quality win in the out-of-conference.
Yeah, because, Mike, they do get to play Duke twice, but you're putting a whole lot of pressure on those games.
Yeah.
If you're at North Carolina. And, the ACC might not be a whole lot different than the American over the past couple years, especially when Houston was still in there. Or in Atlantic 10 this year. There's a lot of good teams in that league. Chances are, more times than not, you're going to be playing games that won't help you and can only hurt you. So that's just a lot of they're putting themselves in a tough spot, that's for sure. All right, Mike, let's go back over to the Midwest. Champaign, Illinois, the Fighting Illini host number 1 Tennessee, and it's the Volunteers who get the W on a Jordan Gainey buzzer-beating layup. This was an ugly one that really could have gone either way. It was a whistle fest, especially in the first half. 28 fouls. Not sure it really benefited one team or the other, but a ton of free throws, very few made field goals. But it's Rick Barnes' Volunteers who get the victory. Was this a good performance for Illinois that just didn't really go their way, or was it more of a missed opportunity?
I mean, this is a game that Illinois wanted to play. They wanted to play scrappy. They wanted it to be ugly. That was the way that Fighting Illini were going to win this game. They came in with, I think they're still I think they're a top 25 team. They're not ranked in top 25. They had a really nice win against Wisconsin during the week after losing to Northwestern, and I think they proved that they belong in the top 25. The big issue for Tennessee was foul trouble in this one. Um, Zakai Ziegler did foul, or yeah, he did foul out. Chaz
He missed a
Lanier did.
lot of time in that second half too, Ziegler.
Oh, yeah, he only played 25 minutes in the game. Chaz Lanier also fouled out in this game. So they had a lot of foul trouble. And at the end of the day, it still wasn't enough to propel Illinois forward. I think this was just a really shaky game for Tennessee. I think if they play Illinois probably 10 times, this game is probably a double-digit victory, 6 out of those 10 times. Um, but at the end of the day, I also, that may have been Tennessee's, other than Louisville at the start of the year, really their second true road game. Um, and so I think there's something to be said. Illinois is a really tough place to play in the Big Ten, one of the toughest, I would argue. The State Farm Center gets pretty loud, I can say from experience, but um, disappointing for the Fighting Illini. I think this was a result that I was looking to see better after a dastardly football Saturday it was for me. But, back to the drawing board. They've got bragging rights on Sunday against Missouri, and I think they're going to get another nice win there.
And that was just a sort of a mental thing for Illinois. I think, Mike, they haven't really won one of these ugly games. They have a very nice offense, and when it's humming, they win. But it wasn't here. It wasn't in the Northwestern game.
No.
They just need, maybe they don't have a go-to guy. Yakishonis is probably him right now, 22 points. But most of those points did come from the free throw line. So really big missed opportunity from Illinois here. And until they can get over the hump in one of these ugly, low-scoring games, I don't think that they're going to reach their potential. But
yeah, Illinois really does lack a primary scorer on this team. They don't have one. They don't have an Io Dusumu like they had in years past. So you saw in this game 15 of 51 from field goals. That's not going to win you many ball games, especially against the number one team in the country. They fought hard, and at the end of the day, it just didn't go their way. Tennessee was able to drive down the court with seconds left and get a bucket, which, I mean, you got to stop the ball. And nobody from Illinois did, and that's why they lost this game, which is very disappointing, but is what it is.
And by all the computer measurements, Mike, Illinois is around 15th in the country, 16th on KenPom. So, usually the data will come true the more games you play. I think Illinois has looked good on a number of occasions this year. They've lost to the number one team in the country, Alabama, who is top 5 in the country, and then at Northwestern in a rivalry game. So they still beat Wisconsin. They still beat Arkansas. They have a good chance to beat a Missouri team, which might be a better win than we thought because Missouri took down Kansas. But again, in the Big Ten, Mike, there'll be plenty of opportunities for big victories. And I predicted Illinois to win the league in our last In a Nutshell power rankings. And
That's lofty.
I still do think they have a chance. It's just not going to take that many Big Ten victories to get there. This league has a bunch of good teams, no great teams. And maybe if you're 14-6, that might be enough. But we do have a couple other games to get to on Saturday here, Mike, so we are going to get to those. We have Dayton hosting Marquette, and it's the Flyers who pick up a big victory. And, Mike, they just did again. We'll talk about this UNLV game later, but they beat UConn in Maui. They beat Northwestern early in the year. They did lose to North Carolina and Iowa State by close margins on the island, but they are starting to put together quite the at-large resume as the Flyers look to get back to the big dance in an Atlantic 10 that looks as good as it has in a while. So, Mike, you got to like what Anthony Grant's doing out there in Ohio.
Oh, man, absolutely. You love what they're doing. This is probably the best Dayton team we've seen since the 2019-2020 season.
For sure.
When they had Obi Toppin. Look, yeah, they had a 2-point loss to North Carolina. That's not turning out to be such a great loss, but losing by 5 to Iowa State, there's no issues with that. Iowa State is a Final Four contending team this year. So, look, Dayton looks really good, and even it looks like they didn't even play one of their best games against UNLV. they still found a way to get the 1-point victory. Now, turning our attention towards this Marquette game, look, this was a tight game the entire second half, but you look at about that 7-minute mark, Dayton was able to take charge in this game and led the rest of the way. A dominant second half performance after being down by 10 in the first. Uh, they outscored Marquette 45-27 in the second half. So really impressive stuff. They were 56% from uh, not not 3-point range. They actually really struggled from the 3-point line. They were just 4 of 19 in this game, and they were 9 of 16 from free throws. So not great shooting all the time, but they were able to limit Marquette to just being 22 of 54 on field goals. So even though Marquette, they just had a hard time scoring, and they committed 13 turnovers in this game, led to a nice Flyers victory when their offense wasn't even that good.
I think, Mike, this Dayton team is really good. You read off all the stats. None of this was fluky at all.
No.
It wasn't a home team that just got hot and beat a team that hadn't played many road games this year. Dayton out-rebounded them. They still they didn't really turn it over, which is obviously what you think of Dayton, but they missed a ton of free throws. They missed a ton of threes, and they still came back from down double digits to win. I was really impressed with Dayton. And an Atlantic 10, Mike, that is looking like it might be able to get a couple bids for the first time in a while. Loyola Chicago looks pretty good. St. Bonaventure, Rhode Island, VCU. You've got St. Joe's, who had the victory in New York against Texas Tech. Like, there's enough teams here in the Atlantic 10 to get 2 or 3 bids. And Dayton is going to be spearheading the charge. They're undefeated at home. They have a great home environment. It's why the first 4 is there every year. And I'm looking forward to watching Dayton play Cincinnati on Friday. That'll be a good one that really could go either way.
It absolutely could. The Atlantic 10 in general, Sean, is going to be a special conference. You even look like a team like Davidson who, albeit they got beat pretty good a couple times in Atlantis, they got a nice win over Providence. So this is a conference that I think we'll probably see 4 bids. I think it's a very significant chance that we see more teams from the Atlantic 10 in the NCAA tournament than we do the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Mike. Now, if you do the averages of all the numbers, the ACC likely does have a higher average just from some of these bottom-of-the-barrel A10 teams, but there's an argument that the tournament contenders in the Atlantic 10, whether it's the top 6 or 7, might be better than the top 6 or 7 in the ACC. You've got Duke and Dayton leading the way. Dayton might be top 15 in the country. Now, I think Duke is probably top 10, and Duke is better, but you have your really good team in the league. You have a couple other good teams. The Atlantic 10 is much better than it's been the last couple of years. Mike, the A10 championship game has essentially been a playing game a couple of years in a row now.
Yeah.
And that is on Sunday. And the committee has sort of just had a slot open for whoever wins that game, whether it's
11 seed.
Duquesne last year got an 11 when they probably should have got a 13, and then they beat BYU, and we know what happens from there. But Atlantic 10 basketball is having as good of a year as they've had in a while. All right, Mike, let's go to Madison Square Garden here. Saturday night, in front of the Mecca, it's UConn against Gonzaga. The Huskies come in sort of rolling, and they start out that way. They throw the first punch. They get up by double digits. Gonzaga does fight back, actually does take the lead at the end of the first half. UConn goes into the break up 3, and then they just proved to be too much for the Zags. But, Mike, pretty much all of the bad taste in their mouths from Maui is gone. 3 impressive victories in a row for UConn since Maui.
Yeah, perhaps Coach Hurley's complaints about how his team, wasn't positioned to play well at Maui. Maybe that's true. They had a really shaky game against Baylor, I think, that first big game afterwards. But this is a huge win against the Gonzaga team that, I got to ask, Sean, is Gonzaga played their best basketball already this season? They've had a couple of losses now, back-to-back losses in games I thought they would win. So they've fallen to 13th in the country, given they're both good teams that they played. Yep. But I think it's concerning when we thought at the start of the year, these first couple of games, they looked like they were truly the best team in the country. So concern a little bit on the face of Gonzaga fans, I think. But UConn, like we said, I think UConn, it's safe to say that they're back. They're looking really good. And Alex Caravan in this game wasn't even very impressive. Only had 8 points and 5 rebounds. He's their team leader, and 8 points, 5 rebounds is not the stat line that your team leader has if you're going to win a big game. William McNeely had a big one in this one, 26 points, 8 rebounds. And then on the bench, a couple of double-digit scorers, Terrace Reed Jr. and Jalen Stewart. So what's also powerful about this UConn team is that they've got guys on the bench that can produce big-time minutes and get big-time points. So, yeah, UConn is looking dangerous again, even if Alex Kierban can give them their best.
Yeah, they are up to 12th in Ken Palm. Mike, outside they were outside of the top 25 after Hawaii. Their defense was outside of the top 100. Well, guess what? It's inside the top 70 now. When they play
Yeah,
with energy, when they have energy in the crowd, I think that they're going to be really good. They're not as athletic as they have been, and they have to get around that. But unless they play like a freak athletic team, I think they're going to win, especially at home. Uh, that's probably why those comments came from Hurley. You're not able to work on anything in these
yeah,
MTEs in between games. You're watching film and maybe the scout team is learning the other plays. That's it. You're not work at putting in new stuff yourself or any of that. But it's clear that their defense was lacking, and it doesn't appear to be anymore. It doesn't have to be brilliant. They have an exceptionally efficient offense. It just has to be solid enough to get them across the line against good teams. And it certainly has against Baylor, on the road against Texas, and then now against Gonzaga. Mike, this was a neutral, but it really was a home game. They did play last year in Spokane at the Spokane Arena, not the Kennel, so they did get their pretend neutral home game back from last year. And so did Kentucky, to be fair.
yeah,
Actually, Gonzaga went to Rupp last year and won. Kentucky got to go to Seattle, which is on the other side of the state from Gonzaga, so maybe not exactly the same. But Kentucky, obviously, the road team won both of those in the fake neutrals, and I
yeah,
believe UConn won last year against Gonzaga too. So these fake neutrals for Gonzaga not exactly paying off this time around. They do have a game against UCLA again in Inglewood, another pretend fake neutral that certainly you'd think that they'd be the road team in. So if they can get
yeah.
that, they'll be in good shape. And Mike, for I didn't really know this until a couple days ago, but Washington State and Oregon State are playing in the WCC this year.
Yep.
And with a
Yeah.
good San Francisco and a good St. Mary's, the conference is probably going to be as good as it has been ever.
Yeah, and I believe this will be Gonzaga's last season in the WCC.
Yep.
So this will be the last chance to see some classic rivalries. And what I'm thinking is the rivalry with St. Mary's. It's always a game that we really look forward to seeing every single year. St. Mary's, they could be a really solid team. They beat Utah on the road earlier this last week. They struggled big time against USC, and also had it. Actually, never mind.
Yeah, they
They
won
crushed
big time.
USC.
Yep.
They won by 35 points.
Yep.
So this is a team that could be really impressive. They lost to Arizona State. They also beat Nebraska. So um, St. Mary's and Gonzaga, this will be probably the final installation of these guys ever being conference rivals. But I think it'll be a really good one this year. Watch out for the WCC potentially getting 3 bids in the NCAA tournament.
I think, Mike, the expanded WCC for now actually benefits St. Mary's more than Gonzaga. They always
It
load
does.
their schedule and you get enough games. But for St. Mary's, they usually play those, middle of the pack power conference teams or top four Mountain West schools or something like that. They've done well enough in those where if they're able to come in second or third in the WCC, they should be good. And that extremely weird conference tournament bracket where basically it's, two new teams enter every day, and
Yeah.
the teams that at the end of the bracket have to win 7 games, stuff like that. But we might. It's just kind of been St. Mary's Gonzaga round 3 in the WCC championship every year. We might not see that this time around because San Francisco is pretty good, Oregon State is pretty good, Washington State is pretty good. So maybe, just maybe, we're gonna have a little bit of a different story out there in the WCC. All right, Mike, we have time for one more game here on Saturday. There were a bunch of good ones. We do apologize that we can't get to all of them. But we're going to go to Bedlam in Oklahoma City at the Paycom Center, the home of the Thunder. It's the Sooners who pick up a victory and get to 10-0. They win 80-65. Mike, we did not really raise the alarm as a potential trap game here, but with the rivalry and Oklahoma's potentially being a little bit lucky to be undefeated, we did say that alarm bells could come up here for the Sooners, but they don't. All five scores go in double figures, and all things considered, it was a pretty easy victory for the Sooners.
Yeah, I mean, this was a dominant win. I expected this game to be a lot closer than it actually was. OU got up to an early lead in the first half and then kind of just coasted from there to get a 15-point victory in this one. It was never really very tight. Yeah, at the end of the day, great execution from the Oklahoma Sooners on offense, especially in the first half, having 43 points. They shot 49% from the field, so they shot really well in this game. They actually got out-rebounded by Oklahoma State, which was surprising for me, Sean. But I think by their ability to just shoot and not really commit too many turnovers, they won the turnover battle in this one. Really impressive stuff for the Sooners. And like you said, every single starter was in double figures. So when you have every single starter in double figures, you're going to have a hard time losing, especially when you're playing a team that is very inefficient on offense.
And Mike, in terms of Oklahoma, they are undefeated and they have played a bunch of good games. They really haven't played anybody elite yet. We've talked about that a number of times. Tomorrow's game against Michigan will be a big measuring stick for them. I think Michigan is probably slight favorites here. That makes sense. If Oklahoma loses it, I think we're probably looking at like a 5th to 7th finish in the SEC. But if they can win it, Mike, they might just be really good.
They might be, yeah. Like
I don't know if they're Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky good, but they could be just outside that.
They might be top 5, right? If they're 5th in the SEC right now, that's probably a 3 seed.
Yep.
And you look at, they kind of got through the battle for Atlantis without playing a very tough schedule, if we're being honest.
It's going to be unfortunate for them at the end of the year that tournament didn't turn out better for them. Even though they won all 3 games.
They won all 3 games, but none of them were convincing wins, and none of them were wins against tournament teams, if we're being honest. So, and then Georgia Tech, that's not helpful. Oklahoma State, that's probably not going to be a very helpful win. So, yeah, I think like you said, Sean, this Michigan game is going to be worth the world. Clearly, the AP voters don't really respect Oklahoma that much with their 10-0 record because they're only ranked 14th in the country.
It actually went down after beating Oklahoma State here on a neutral.
Yeah,
by more than they were supposed to.
But hey, they'll figure out real quick when they get into conference play. Alabama, A&M, at Georgia, and then the Texas Longhorns are going to be their first 4 games. So we're going to figure out real quick if this OU team is for real or not.
All right, Mike. Well, that is all the time we have for him tonight. Clearly a number of other big games on Saturday. There is another big slate next Saturday, and we'll preview that on our next episode. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.